So today it's the Prussic versus the Klemheist, and I'm going to be talking pros and cons, and we'll see which one you might want to use as you are learning to rappel. And if you're curious what a floor jack has to do with this, then stick around till the end. So the first one is the Prussic. I have another video exactly on how to tie this, so you can check that out up here. But a real quick is offset your knot, wrap it through 1, 2, 3 times, pull that tight, and then you just need to get it dressed so that the lines are not crossing each other, and you kind of roll it towards the center. So it's looking something like that. You want to make sure it's nice and tight so that when you move it, you hear the friction against the rope. And once that happens, you're good. If you can clip a carabiner through there, it doesn't touch the knot, good sign. Generally, you're going to do 3 wraps, although you can vary that up depending on the diameter of your rope. Next is the Klemheist. And what we're going to do is wrap the top of this, not near the knot. We're going to wrap it at least 3 times up the rope. So that would be 3. And then bring the bottom of this loop through the top loop. Okay, and then we pull down. Now, how both of these knots work is that it's collectively pulling at each of these strands, and when you pull on it, it's actually misshaping the rope that it's grabbing. And so when it creates that bend, it causes a lot of friction and it makes it harder to pass that area. So here's my considerations in terms of which one you would want to use. Now, the Klemheist here is directional, right? So if you were to pull this way, it's not going to hold as well as pulling down. And so you really want to make sure that you know which way you are going to be pulling and that you do that correctly. With the Prussic, it pulls and grips equally from either direction. So that's a benefit on the Prussic. I've always heard that the Prussic has better holding capability than the Klemheist. We're going to test that here today. Now, neither of these are very easily released under load. I did do a video up here about how you can actually grip this Prussic and pull it. So if you are rappelling and you are holding onto this with all of your strength, that if you fall, you can pull it with you. And so you want to use your fingertips. Now, that is true, but it does take a lot of force, and same with the Klemheist. However, the Klemheist is a little easier released than the Prussic. So I would say, depending on your application, the Prussic may be a win there, but sometimes you want something that releases a little easier. And when we're talking about release, for this Prussic, all you're doing is pushing this little tongue out here, and that kind of gets these outer rings or outer wraps loose, and that is where a majority of the pull is coming from, and so now you can move that pretty easily. Okay, now with the Klemheist, same sort of deal. You're taking the tongue and unwrapping here, and that makes it looser. Obviously these weren't under load yet, so that's not really an issue. Now, the other thing to consider that I've talked about in this video is that neatness counts, and basically making it where somebody can look at your system or you can look at somebody else's system and know right away, is that safe? Is that something I should be climbing on? And this may be a little more confusing to look at. I mean, if you're used to tying knots and all of this is easily recognizable, but when this is pulled and it's kind of stretched out, it looks a little funky, whereas the Prussic pretty much just maintains this shape. It does get a little mangled, but really it stays recognizable. And so I would say that is also a win for the Prussic. The other thing I think of here is, with my search and rescue background, is that the Prussic is the standard. So if that means anything to you, that, you know, search and rescue, generally we're having a higher standard than, say, climbing, then the Prussic is what most of us use, so maybe that's a win. So a potential win for the Klemheist here is that you can tie the same knot with webbing. So you can take a webbing loop like this and do the same thing where we wrap it 1, 2, 3 times, put the bottom of the webbing through, get this back down, This does seem a little messier to me because, you know, trying to get it to lay flat, but this does still bind up really nicely. And so totally legitimate knot for webbing. Now I used this about a month ago where I was kind of stuck. I was in a rush, not a good idea, trying to beat the darkness where I was trying to camp on a hammock off of a cliff, and I basically ran out of Prussic loops and just, you know, poor planning, I guess. And so I ended up using webbing with a Klemheist, and I was really glad that I knew this knot to get me out of a bind. Now, as you're deciding which one, I would highly recommend practicing this in a very safe environment, such as, you know, off a porch or a stairway or something, like I show in the beginning of this video up here, and really get a feel for it and see which ones you like better in terms of what makes sense in your brain and how they act on the rope and releasing them and all of that, and go from there. Now, what I generally use is the Prussic. It has the greatest holding power. It's what I'm used to from search and rescue and what I was originally taught for rappelling, and it's always served me well. That being said, I do periodically use the Klemheist in either form or the auto block. I would caution with the auto block though, because it's much easier released under load, and so I would say kind of make sure that you get your things dialed in, make sure that you have your skills and knowledge and equipment before you mess with that too much, just because it does have that potential to release. I would much rather be caught on the rope and have to figure out how to get up and release it versus sliding down the rope and not being stopped. So that's my opinion. You know, let me know what you think in the comments. So now is the part where we get to this tape and that jack stand. But before we do that, I really want to encourage you guys to tie up that like button by turning it blue and considering subscribing. On Adventures in Reach, I do videos about inspiring outdoor adventures that hopefully encourage you to do the same, the information to help make those happen, and increasing your confidence outdoors. And if you are interested in all of that, then again, you might consider subscribing, and you might go down to the description and join my email list. I have some free gear packing checklists for rappelling and sunfish sailing. I won't spam you with a bunch of email, but there's only going to be good stuff in there. And lastly, if you are interested in any of this equipment or other equipment for rappelling, such as harnesses or devices, carabiners, any of that I would recommend, then check the description for those links. All right, so after weighting the rope, I'm going to take a piece of tape, put it up here, tighten this Prussic, and put it right up against the tape. Then we just have to attach our jack stand and do a little drop. So let's see if this moves. Here we go. We'll move it up to the tape. One more time. Moved about 1/16 of an inch. I'd say that's pretty good. Let's go to the next one. So next is a Klemheist with the cordage. And here we go, drop one. Okay, so this one I'd say pretty similar. You can see maybe 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch, just slightly more. Let's try the webbing. All right, so now we're ready for the webbing. I did re-wrap this because it had a couple twists, so it should be good to go now. Up to the tape. This funky thing, I just wound it through itself a few times so it doesn't hit the ground, so the jack doesn't hit the ground. So here we go. All right, and one, and two. So that one's about maybe 1/4 of an inch. So that had slipped slightly more, but I would say with all of these, that little bit of slippage is not very much. So hopefully that makes you confident that using one of these while rappelling will make a huge difference in terms of your safety. Now, when you think about using webbing, I would really caution that as the main thing that you're using frequently, because it's going to wear out quicker. It's not meant to have that same rub abrasion resistance as the outer sheath of a rope or cordage would have. And now keep in mind that that was probably only about 40 pounds on it, and so you're going to be considerably heavier than that, and it will pull more. But really, I would say that either of those knots will work great, and there's other reasons about why or why not you would choose them. So again, comment below which one you prefer and let me know why.